Welcome to Crappy to Happy podcast, a special series on our Sacred Stories podcast dedicated to sharing the incredible stories of grit, grace, and love in our new book, Crappy to Happy, Sacred Stories of Transformational Joy. I am your host, Rev Ariel Patricia, and together we will answer the question, do bad things happen to good people, or could the difficulties we face be gifts in disguise? Today we are speaking with Judy Lemon, whose story in Crappy to Happy is titled The Magic Tree. And Judy is a shamanic practitioner and trauma therapist with a private practice in Southern California. She brings her extensive experience and knowledge into her work of helping others to develop their own spiritual gifts. Judy is the author of the upcoming book, Machete Woman, A Tale of Resilience and Rebirth. And it is my pleasure to say, welcome, Judy Lemon, to Crappy to Happy.
Thank you, Ariel Patricia. It's lovely to be here.
I'm excited you're here. And listeners, we just had a quick little chat because yesterday Judy received her copies of Crappy to Happy. And Judy, just take a second and share that, because your story, Crappy to Happy, is your first published work.
It is. I've actually been writing stories since I was 7 years old. Although obviously the writings have matured a bit in that time. But I didn't set out to be a published author. I would always write because I loved it. But now, because this wonderful opportunity just suddenly appeared, and so did the book. You know, all of a sudden I got 2 boxes of book on my doorstep, and there's my name in there. And I went, it's so exciting. I'm still so excited about it. I'm probably going to be really excited about it for quite a few months now.
Thank you for sharing that. That makes me, honestly very happy, because that really is the work of Sacred Stories Publishing, is to, and we say it, is to help divine voices, share their stories and share their work. And a anthology series like Crappy to Happy is a part of. It just makes me so happy because it's an opportunity for so many people to share at once, some really important and deep stories that knowing it's as meaningful to you as the author as it is to us, it's really special, and we appreciate it a lot.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's your story, The Magic Tree. When we read it, when you sent us your story, we meaning me and my co-author Cannabis, were like, wow, this is a great story, and we definitely want to have this in Crappy to Happy. So share with our audience what your story, The Magic Tree, is about.
Well, you told that I'm a shamanic practitioner. I have been apprenticing with native Peruvian shamans for about 15 years. So this story is about one night when I had to face my fears. One of the things that particularly native shamanic people have to do is really to face their fears, because lots of them live in very rural places. There's wild animals. They face things that we don't face here in like the United States. So my story is about the night that my current teacher, Luis, put me out in the jungle by myself to do a medicine ceremony with a visionary plant and to face my fears.
I have to tell you, so there's so many levels to your story, and Judy really walks you through, the story that night. And my first read of it, I was like, there's no way, absolutely no way that I would do that. And then my second and third read of it, when I really kind of deepened into the energy of how you could do that or why you would do that. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I saw and I think I saw a glimmer of it in me, an inner courage, an inner light that we can center into that allows us to do something like you did, which was spend the night alone in the jungle?
I have done a lot of things like this in my past. I was always a weird little kid. Um, I, for example, I moved on a whim to England many years ago to be a rock star. I started working on a pilot's license over there. The more outlandish things, or things that would take me a while to either get up courage or plan, the more attractive they are to me. When I really have to work for something, particularly if it's something that's kind of scary, when I get that thing, it means more to me. But when I had this opportunity, when Louise told me that this is part of the tradition to do this outside, my biggest fear wasn't so much necessarily the animals. It was more of the like the mosquitoes and the bugs and things like that, because the jungle is full of all these wild things that want to eat you. But I think the thing that really helped me to fulfill the task was that I had already come so far. I had already done an apprenticeship with another teacher, and which that is the subject of Machete Woman, the full book that will be coming out. And there were many times, because it's a very difficult, very uncomfortable path to learn. But my thought is, I've come this far, I've spent all this money, I'm not going to say no. If this is what they do, and they're human beings that have blood run through their veins just like me, then I can do it too. So I just kind of dive in and go, okay, if this is what you want me to do, let's do it.
Well, there's a couple things in there that I think is really great to just dive into a little bit more. One, that does take courage, right? That ability to just say, I'm just going to go for it. If they can do it, I can do it. And that I think is a beautiful quality to have. But the other part that I think needs to be mentioned is that you had also been preparing for this, right? And so our readers, when they read your story, if their first reaction is, there's no way I could spend the night alone in the jungle, this wasn't your first task, right? You had been preparing. And so in addition to your fearless energy and attitude, I would imagine that in your shamanic practices, there's a deeper core you must tap into.
Yes. One of the things that I like to tell my participants and my students is that when you create sacred space, when it's done with respect and integrity, it's often safe. You can be out in the middle of the jungle and you may see eyes looking at you through the trees, or imagine that you see eyes through the trees, but for some reason they never come close. So I had spent quite a long time living in the jungle with my first teacher, and we saw a lot of evidence of that. He and I would sit out at night and we would go through training, and I would look around, and I thought it was it's beautiful. It's actually a wonderful experience that not a whole lot of people get to have.
That's another beautiful way to look at it, and I do try to look at that as well, and even life in general, right? When fears may come up, or questions about whether or not I should dive in, I think like, well, why am I here anyway? Or why wouldn't I? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because this is a life we have to live, and let's dig in as much as possible. But I think, to go back, I think that the preparation, the spiritual journey, there's a deepening that is always happening that does prepare us for more and more. And your story, the magic tree, and and your preparation and you spending the night in the jungle on your own is such a great story. I encourage everyone to read, but also it's also a very inspiring story. And again, it's, for me, I see multiple layers of energy running through it, from fearlessness through preparation, through a deeper core you have tuned into, and that, that is inspiring in itself.
I think the way that I also make a lot of these difficult decisions is I project myself into the future. And even if in the moment I think, oh my goodness, he wants me to be out in the jungle on my own. I'm not a Peruvian native. I'm not used to this. Then I'll run around, I'll get all excited. But then I project myself into the future and think, would I be disappointed if I didn't do this? Would I look back on this and say, dang, I should have gone for it when I had that chance? And I know what I'm like. I would have said, I don't want to miss that opportunity. So that's what helps me make a lot of my decisions.
That's also really good advice. Now, let's talk about your shamanic journey, because you do have an upcoming book, Machete Woman, which I love, A Tale of Resilience and Rebirth. Just speak really briefly on why shamanism, or the practice of shamanic practices, why that attracted you. What drew you to shamanism?
I had an experience, let's see, so it's been about 20 years now. This is when I was living in England, and I was walking through Covent Garden with this friend of mine who was a magical practitioner, and I knew nothing about shamanism, but I saw a poster on the wall for a group offering an introduction to shamanism week in the mountains of North Wales. And I looked at it and something kind of bloomed in me, and I said, I'm going to go to that. And he said, well, if you're going to learn shamanism, they're the people to learn about. There's a very good group in England called Eagle's Wing that does excellent shamanic training. So I went up to North Wales, not having a clue about what I was going to get into, just knowing that I should be there. And we were working with trance postures. And the very first trance posture that I did was one that they call it's a metamorphosis one. And I shapeshifted into a bear. And I was so amazed because I knew that I was present in my human physical body, but through my eyes, I saw that I was like this 9-foot black bear, and I looked at my hands and they had become claws. And I wanted to just like swipe things and just be a bear. And I remember at the time I went, oh my goodness, this shamanism stuff is so cool. I think this is my life path. And it's been going ever since. That's how I got into it.
I think that's a wonderful experience, and another wonderful story. I'm assuming that's in Machete Woman, or should it be?
Yeah. Oh, yes, it is, because in addition to talking about my apprenticeship with my first teacher, I do talk about how I got there, because I realize a lot of readers are going to go, wait a minute, how did you get into this? So I had to back up and talk about how I actually did get into it, because it was not something that I went looking for. It came looking for me.
I absolutely. And I think the most profound experiences in life, that's how it happens, right?
Yes.
They seem to find us, or we meet in the middle somewhere. It's interesting because, we ask the question, do bad things happen to good people, or could the difficulties we face be gifts in disguise? And your story, The Magic Tree, I think really speaks to the second part of that question. Could the difficulties we face be gifts in disguise? And so your difficulty was spending the night in the jungle. Your difficulty was your concern about the mosquitoes, which it's a very valid concern, because that you could be literally almost eaten alive by morning with mosquitoes in a jungle, right? I mean, that's nothing to take lightly.
No.
But going through the process, what was your gift, or did you find a gift in the process of spending the night under the magic tree?
I think the gift that lovely Renako tree gave me was to not be so given over to fears. This is something, as I have been going through my path, and then I now also work with my own students about facing fears. Sometimes we get these things in our head, like with me, it was like, well, could a jaguar come and eat me? Could a giant anaconda come squeeze the life out of me? What if it starts raining? And you start getting this, what about this? What about this? What about this? But, false evidence appearing real spells out to be fear. And most of the things that we fear never happen. And as it turned out, nothing bad happened to me. All the things that I was afraid of never materialized at all. And I sat with my back to this beautiful tree that protected me for the whole night. And I remember looking up at the stars, and the sky was perfectly clear. And I went, oh my goodness, what on earth was I ever afraid of? This is the most beautiful experience I have ever had in my entire life. So it's really taught me to watch the fear that may come up in me and to analyze, like, is this a real thing? What would happen if I actually stood up in front of it and said, give it to me, give me your worst? Because lots of times it just turns around and disappears.
I think conquering fear is a beautiful gift, right? That you received. Judy Lemon, your story in Crappy to Happy, titled The Magic Tree, really is a beautiful story. And it's not one that I think people will read in many books. And that's also what I love about the stories in Crappy to Happy. They are so varied, but they all really do speak to what we say are stories of grit, grace, and love. And yours is definitely, I would say, a story of grit. Yeah. And a story of love and grace. It's really all of them. Tell our listeners, if you will, please, what your website is, how they can find you, and a little bit, about your upcoming book, Machete Woman.
I can be found. My website is the same as my name. It's just simply judylemon.com. If they type in machetewoman.com, it will also lead to the same website. And that has all my current offerings, mentoring and teaching and healing work. Machete Woman is me. The reason that I decided to call the book Machete Woman is I found I quite liked whacking things with a large blade. When I was a child, I was a big fan of King Arthur, and I wanted to have a sword and be a knight of the round table, which was probably a bit silly for a little girl, but, fantasies are fantasies. And when I started living in the jungle with my first teacher, Javier, he said, there are certain pieces of jungle equipment that are absolutely essential that you must have. One of them is a pair of knee-high rubber boots, and the other is a machete. And I said, well, what do I need a machete for? And he kind of looked at me like I was silly, but I didn't know. And he says, well, apart from whacking your way through the brush, he goes, you might need to deal with poisonous snakes or defend yourself against animals. And I went, okay, that settles it. I'm getting a machete. So I picked one up, and I realized it became like my jungle version of Excalibur. And I found when I was working through a lot of my own processes, which is what a lot of the apprenticeship is, when I would get really frustrated and my teacher would just walk away from me, I would just go find an old piece of wood and I would just whack the heck out of it with my machete. And it was very satisfying. So I thought, yeah, I'm Machete Woman. That has to be my tale.
Oh, I think it fits you perfectly. And there's a really great picture of you. I don't know if it's on your site, but I've seen it on social media of you holding a big machete. And yes, and I love to know that that is your Excalibur. That's could not be more perfect. So honestly, so Judy Lemon, I just want to say thank you so much for being my guest today, and thank you for sharing your story, the magic tree, in Crappy to Happy.
And thank you, Ariel Patricia, for giving me my very first opening into the publishing world. That's wonderful. I have absolutely no idea where this is going, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm just in it for the ride.
I think it's going to be a super fun ride. I do.
Wonderful.
I think you're going to enjoy it. So thank you again. And listeners, you've been listening to Judy Lemon. Her website is judylemon.com. That's Judy with a Y. And you can find out more about Judy's work as a shamanic practitioner and her upcoming book, Machete Woman. You can also read Judy's story, The Magic Tree, in our new book, Crappy to Happy, Sacred Stories of Transformational Joy, which is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, booksellers worldwide, or even direct from Sacred Stories Publishing. So thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, Rev Ariel Patricia, and until next time, as always, I encourage you to write your sacred story well.